We had a lot of news in the past 24 hours, and we have some context on that coming up. Tuesday night, Americans gave Democrats their biggest House gains in a midterm election since Watergate. President Trump emerged somewhat in denial, declaring that Republicans' performance, quote, was close to complete victory. Democrats have won control of the House, where they gained at least 28 seats, with 15 still undecided. And Republicans lost 7 governor's mansions and 323 seats in the state legislature, for a total of 367 during the Trump presidency.
Hold on 1 second, because that's an important number. Willie, you know how we had said at the end of Barack Obama's 8 years in office. Yes. We said, hey, listen, we understand everybody's focusing on Hillary Clinton losing the race, but if you want to understand just how bad things are with the Democratic Party, you've got to look at the 1,000 seats that were lost over Barack Obama's 8 years. Yes. To understand the true scale of this thumping, just how badly Donald Trump lost on Tuesday night, how horrible he is for the Republican Party nationwide, the Republicans lost a third. They lost a third of those 1,000 seats in Trump's first 2 years. Right. People, you know, like Rick and Steve Schmidt and others that have been saying he's going to destroy the Republican Party, they don't have to look 5 years from now. He's doing it right now. Yeah, they won a couple of Senate seats in the reddest of red states where Donald Trump won by 20 points. So what? Big deal. They're getting routed on the state level, they're getting routed on the local level, and they got routed in Congress.
Well, that's why we were saying yesterday, Democrats who had mixed feelings about what happened on Tuesday night, I think that was because those splashy, high-profile races didn't go their way.
Right,
Andrew
the
Gillum
emotional
didn't win,
ones.
Beto O'Rourke didn't win, Stacey Abrams, we'll see whether or not she prevails there. I think that was part of the mixed feelings, but as you say, you lose the House, you have all the power, and boy, we learned yesterday already how important that power in the House of pushback is going to be based on the decision that the president made. We'll talk about the firing of Jeff Sessions. But again, the state houses are where the action is. It's where the country changes. It's where things will happen differently today in January when those governorships and those legislatures become more Democratic.
But we all know that Democrats taking control of the House gives them certain powers to check this presidency and to compel him to answer questions, for example, to release his tax returns in a way that he has not experienced before, possibly in his life, given what we've seen and what we know about this individual, about this president. And that's the thing that I think shocked him the most yesterday. And in our experience and the patterns that we've seen with him, everything that he did yesterday was in response or to deflect. And we can talk about Mueller, and we can talk about the gravity of firing Jeff Sessions and how weird it was to do it lurchingly the way he did. But the bottom line is he lost big time yesterday. Well, he hates losing. And on top of it, Democrats have gained the power to basically ask him every question they finally want the answer to.
Donald Trump was freaked out yesterday. Everybody could see how freaked out he was. And it was, it was embarrassing, actually, watching him firing Jeff Sessions. I know everybody put their hair on fire. It was embarrassing watching him fire Jeff Sessions.
And it's serious, of course.
Well, yeah, but you know what? We'll get to that. Jim Acosta?
Exactly.
It was horrible that he would do that. But there's a reason, Rick, why he did it the day after he got trounced. The day after Republicans had their worst electoral beating since Watergate. Donald Trump was humiliated. He was weak. He was battered. He was confused. You could see him up there. He was just baffled. He didn't know what to do. He was freaking out. And it was just like a little kid in a sandbox trying to kick sand on other people when he was the weakest person there. And so what does he do? He calls Yamiche, who we have on the show, a racist. He's screaming.
Think about that.
He's screaming at Jim Acosta. And then he fires Jeff Sessions. I mean, I say the press shouldn't take the bait. This is about Donald Trump trying to distract from just how weak he is now, how vulnerable he is now.
I think when he went out there yesterday, I watched the press conference, and it was an hour and 15 minutes of, Trump bloviating, and it seemed to me sort of very staged, he knew what he was doing. He wanted to go out there and pick a fight. And so let's pick a fight with Jim Acosta, Yamiche Alcindor, and of course, April. And look, I think it was Bush who had the word thumping, right? That was his word. And then Obama's word was shellacking. And so we need a new word for Trump. I think his word was schlonged, but I'm not. Maybe that's what.
I don't think
no,
so.
we don't want to use that. Okay.
No, we won't do that.
I think he called it a complete victory, right, or something.
Well, but that's the juxtaposition, right?
I mean, that's Baghdad. It's a Baghdad bomb complete victory.
Right.
He was beaten so badly. You look at those House races, and those House races keep coming in, Sam. They keep coming in for the Democrats.
They're going to end up with something like 37 gains, which is a huge. I mean, you remember 2006, right?
Loss since Watergate.
So you remember 2006? 2006 was a seminal seismic shift.
Huge.
That year, House Dems, I think, gained 31 seats. So this put that into perspective. Trump's vulnerable right now. I think he knows he's vulnerable right now. I think he was lashing out in all the ways you're talking about, and I think he expects us to take the bait and to be covering Jim Acosta.
By the way, everybody didn't they?
I mean,
nobody
stand
was
with
talking.
Jim Acosta.
I watched
It
last
was
night.
wrong.
You know what the huge story was last night? The huge
press.
story was that the press followed him down the rabbit holes that he put out there, when in fact, what's going to impact this country and this Constitution more than anything else is that Democrats.
The world.
And the world. The
And the
Democrats
world.
now check him. It's no longer a one-party rule.
And even this Attorney General Sessions news, I mean, you have to contextualize a little bit. So it's obviously a huge issue that he now has a political ally in the role of Attorney General. And it could end up being the beginning of the end for the Mueller probe, right? But because House Democrats now are running the committees, they could theoretically subpoena whatever work Mueller has done and then bring it into the committee level. Now, the president will fight it. But the House Democrats can now continue what Mueller is doing, whereas prior to this election, this would be a huge, epic constitutional crisis. I will say Trump does have one ace in the hole still, and that is the Senate map is really favorable to him. He will have more senators in the next Congress, so he can confirm people to his cabinet who are more sycophantic now. He can also continue appointing conservative judges.
Except, guess what? When you start talking about Republicans having 53, 54, take Mitt Romney off of there.
Oh my goodness! Did you see his tweets yesterday?
Romney went after
I saw
Trump
that.
yesterday.
I think he's going to be
Burr in North Carolina. That's a swing state.
A thorn.
And Burr has been a straight shooter.
And Cory Garner's up for election in 2020. So that could be
Cory
problematic.
Garner cannot afford to be a sycophant for Trump and kill this. I mean, Trump is in the same position now as he was before. And I really wonder, Willie, if he didn't know, okay, I'm going to fire Sessions. I told people I'm going to fire Sessions. But I know I can't go after Rosenstein. I know I can't go after Mueller. But I'm going to go and throw this out here as a smokescreen.
Yeah, I think so, but it's still, yes, he wants people to chase his story, but it still has real-world implications. This guy, Matthew Whitaker, who was a U.S. attorney in Iowa, is on television and on Twitter calling the Mueller probe a witch hunt, retweeting something that calls the Mueller investigation a lynch mob. He has actively been on television and online. He wrote a column for CNN.com.
Really, that was his job interview.
Railing.
Well, it was.
You say that jokingly, but Trump saw him on TV.
It was.
It was.
And said, I want that guy
It's just like the
at
Beverly
justice.
Hills guy. He goes on
Right.
TV. He talks about Trump and how they ought to be able to scam the government. Now he's running the IRS.
The IRS.
Quite literally, a CNN co-panelist was tweeting last night that he had backstage green room conversations with Whitaker, in which Whitaker said he would fly out from Iowa to New York to get on CNN precisely so that he could get a job in the Trump administration.
Right.
And now he's the
But
chief
see,
law enforcement officer in the
again,
country.
let's take this, though, to the next step, which is your Mueller. You're putting together your obstruction of justice charge, and he has this puzzle, this hole in the puzzle. He goes,
What could fit in that puzzle?
What am I going to put there? Oh, he fires the United
Excellent.
States Attorney General and appoints a hack, and may not have even done that legally, to obstruct justice and stop this investigation. Boom. Oh, the puzzle's complete. And guess what? If Donald Trump gets rid of Mueller, now the Democrats can just hire him. He can now work for the House of Representatives. And if they want to send all the information, which you're going to, they're going to send to the states. He thinks he's going to stop his children if they've done something wrong from going to jail. they'll just be in state jail instead of a federal penitentiary.
And here's the other difference to bring the conversation full circle. As of
By the way, no pardoning if any of these people
Right.
are sent to state jails. So he's got no next plan.
And as of 36 hours ago, instead of Democrats just shouting on television or sending out tweets, Jerry Nadler comes out as head of Judiciary. Adam Schiff comes out as head of Intel and said, wait a minute. This doesn't fly. We're going to look into this Matthew Whitaker guy. We're going to see if this was okay. There is pushback in the country now.
Yeah. Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.